the first language that I learn.
Okay, very good. Next, how about Miss Hornales, Anna Rose?
Um, as like what my classmate said, ma'am, first language is our mother tongue or a person native language. So our first language, we actually learn it first from our group of people we belong or from our mother.
Oh,
So that is our first language, ma'am.
okay, very good. What last tayo? What about Angelica? Angelica, how do you pronounce your surname,
Yes.
Angelica?
Tonggol po.
Tonggol. Okay, Miss Tonggol, go ahead.
Aside from what they said that language is our native language, I believe that language can learn like effortlessly or it is less complex than L2 or the second language.
Mm, very good. Okay. All your answers are correct. Okay. Language is the most significant aspect which makes us different from all other species because aside these other creatures that are cognitively lower than us
Oo.
can still communicate. Who is that? Kindly turn your microphones off, please. Thank you. Okay. So these creatures can still communicate, but among all these creatures in the world, we are at the top of the food chain because we can communicate using arbitrarily decided symbols. Accordingly, language acquisition is the most impressive aspect of human development, both in psychological and in cognitive perspective. So it only involves this part right here. However, all the normal human beings acquire the language they first encounter as children. It starts when we are young. Then they might learn multiple languages as time goes by, but those languages will always be different from their first language that they acquired or by being exposed to. So it is evident that there are a lot of differences between the first language and the second language of the person. So from the answers of your classmate, a first language, a native tongue, or a native language, or it can also be called mother, father, or parent tongue, or also known as arterial language, or L1. Okay, yan yung code ng first language, L1. It is a language that a person has been exposed to from birth or within the critical period. Now, we are going to talk further about critical period in one of the theories in our midterm. Okay, it's a language that a first language is a language that babies acquire from birth until 7 to 8 years old. Question to everybody: since it was mentioned in the definition that a first language is acquired from birth to 7 to 8 years old, is there a possibility that a child can have two or three first languages? Who would like to answer that? I will lower all the hands raised so I can clearly see who wants to answer the question. I repeat. It was mentioned in the definition that a language. Yes, Miss Kaday.
Yes, ma'am. For me, ma'am, it's a yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Because it's say that um, I can say that it depends on the parent, mom, if they teach their children, either it's in other language, either it's English or Tagalog, ma'am. At the same time, uh, they are the one who mold or they raise their children, ma'am, to know different kind of language in childhood moment.
Miss Kaday, you are focusing on the perspective of the parents. What about the child? Is it possible for a child to have two or three first languages?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Why?
Because the children is if the parent mom see interesting things to the children, mom, they the parent could encourage children to learn more. Then children is also are willing to know about when the parent is you know, the, is more passionate to teach the children, ma'am.
Thank you, Miss Kaday. What about you, Mr. Mata? Lester?
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
For example, when the child watching movies, or when the child watching movies, ma'am, that the time that they will know the other languages, just like that's the time that they will know the other languages, because when they are watching videos, those child also um ano, also uh, wait lang.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mata. What about Barillo, Erica?
Ma'am, for me, ma'am, the child can
Have.
have his or her second language
No, no, no.
because
We're still talking about
um
first language. Can
first
have
language, ma'am.
two,
First,
three first
sorry
languages?
po.
Okay.
First language because while we are still young, ma'am, because I have a sister who is in her she is only 1 years old,
Mhm.
and she speak her language starts from mama
Mhm.
and followed by papa. So for me, ma'am, yes, it is possible for them to have a first language because they can adapt in their environment, especially in their home po.
Okay. So thank you. Now the key answer there, the key point there is yes. A child can have two or three first languages. But the basis there is that if the child learned these languages from birth, they acquired it from birth until about 7 or 8 years old. Okay. Also, one indication to identify if that really is the child's first language, if because they can keep learning the language even after those years to master even all those idiomatic expressions, right? So when they reach the most complex part, because they have it has levels kasi, and we will discuss that in our midterm and finals. So it has certain levels where you can consider that a child is really eloquent or can be considered an advanced speaker of the language. Okay, parang native speaker na kumbaga. So if they can reach the stage where they can even use complex sentence to converse with other people, and they can even comprehend or use idiomatic expressions in their conversations, then they are considered masters or advanced learners when it comes to language. So at that case, if a child learns it from birth to 7 to 8 years old, then it's considered that that it is also their first language. Now, children sometimes, especially in our country, grow up in a bilingual homes that according to this definition can have more than one mother tongue or native language. So if, for example, your dad is French, from France, and then your mom is Spanish from Spain. So the baby might be exposed to those languages at the same time because we have here a mom who speaks Spanish and a dad who speaks French. So he is exposed to two languages and he acquires this language until he reaches 78 years old. Then that person, that child, has two first languages. So in that case, the baby is said to have two first languages and they can master both languages as they grow up acquiring them. Okay? So again, I repeat, first language is often assigned by the letter L and the number one. That's L1 by linguistic professionals. But because kids acquire it naturally, does not mean that they should not learn it. Okay. One great example of this is Filipino. Okay, just because we are exposed in a household where we use Filipino doesn't mean that we don't have to learn it. Okay, that's why we still have Filipino subjects in elementary and high school and even in college because we are going to learn the complexities of it. Sometimes kasi when we are exposed in two or three other languages, we cannot have a concentrated information, di ba? Like me, okay? I grew up in in a household where we speak Bisaya. But then when I grew up, when I was in elementary, of course, we're exposed in English, we're exposed in Filipino or in Tagalog, kumbaga. then yung concentration ko ng knowledge when it comes to Bisaya, medyo konti. May mga Bisaya words akong hindi naiintindihan, meron din naman akong mga Filipino words na hindi maintindihan, meron din naman akong mga English words na hindi maintindihan. So there is less concentration. That's why the goal of going to school is to make sure that since we already acquired the Filipino language, we have to learn more about it. Okay? That's it. Their learning can be reinforced in the classroom to emphasize the knowledge of course, grammar rules, idiomatic expressions, metaphors, syntax, and many more concepts. We're going to learn about phonology, morphology, semantics, syntax, all of it in school now. So we are no longer acquiring the language, we are learning the language. So we're going to talk more about language learning and language acquisition in our next lesson, okay? Now, the first language of a child is part of that child's personal, social, and cultural identity. Now, another impact of the first language is that it brings the reflection and learning of successful social patterns of acting and speaking. Now, there is a research that suggested that while a non-native speaker may, well, somehow develop fluency in a targeted language for about like 2 years of immersion. For example, I am going to Korea, I'm going to stay there for 2 years. It can still take between 5 to 7 years for me to be on the same working level as their native speaking counterparts. Okay, just because I say that, oh, I've learned Korean when, through books or lessons that I've taken as time goes by, if I'm going to subject myself into an environment full of Korean speaking people, it will still take 5 to 7 years for me to be able to converse to them in a native level. Okay, that's why I am here to make sure that you have molded, or improved your way of speaking, that you can be at par with those who's native speakers, ENL learners, English as native speaking learners. Okay, now next question for everyone: what is a second language? What does second language mean? Yes, Operio.
The second language is refers to what we learned at a later stage or a language that learned by a person after his or her native language.
Uh-huh. Okay, very good. Concise answer. Who else? Okay. By the way, if you're raising your hand, if I'm not calling you, it's because I'm giving chances to those who weren't able to speak. But rest assured, if I can continuously see your surnames on my screen, raising your hand, it's always a factor for us it affects how we grade you. Like for example, in participation, like, oh, I can always, oh, very familiar with the surname. Ito yung nakikita ko lagi na nagre-recite. So I'm going to give a high mark on participation and recitation in this part. Okay? So it helped you. So I want you to make efforts so that I can always remember your surname and add a little more for the participation. And of course, at the same time, you're learning, and I'm learning from you as well. Okay? What about Derilon?
Okay, language is usually learned at a late age or after a mother tongue.
Uh-huh.
A L2 or a language is non-native language
Mm-hmm.
or a non-native tongue. And
Mm-hmm.
usually it is learned actively by studying grammar rules or many concepts.
Okay. From Judy Ann Panawanan, bigla na lang po nagsistop ang Zoom, ma'am. Does it happen to everyone? Because if it happens to everyone, then my internet connection is the problem. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, don't worry because I have our session recorded. So I will still post it on your open LMS para pwede niyong balikan. Okay? So, if you are having problems checka ako ng checka tapos hindi niya pala naririnig, sayang naman, di ba? So, kindly tell me, okay? Pag halimbawa, medyo choppy na naman si ma'am, i-click niyo lang yung reaction na itong heart. Ayan, yung heart. I-click niya para makita ko na, ay, hala, medyo hindi maganda yung connection ko. Okay? Thank you so much for informing me. Next, we have another one. I want to hear the voice of Malong. Cherry Lee, what's second language, Cherry Lee?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Second language is concerned with the process and study. It is a personal choice or motivation.
Okay. Precise and correct as well. What about Power natin itong mga nakapagtaas na ng kamay. What about, wait, Narbonito? Narbonito?
Ma'am,
Yes.
for me, ma'am, second language learned by a person after his or her native language, and it can be learned while other communicate her.
Oh, that's it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Now, a second language is a language, as what your classmate had mentioned, usually learned at a later stage. Okay? Um, it is a non-native language, of course, because our native language is our first language. So automatically, whatever language we learn after our first language is our second language. There is no limit of second languages that one can learn. You can learn as many languages as you want after your first language. One can acquire many languages, often abbreviated as L2, like second language, L3, third language, L4, fourth language. Okay. A second language, again, I repeat, is non-native. Non-native. Okay. It's non-native because your first language is your native language. Okay. And it is challenging to be fluent in it, just like how it is challenging to learn English for us. I mean, we're so good at speaking Hiligaynon, we're so good at speaking Cebuano, we're so good at speaking Tagalog, but it's sometimes very challenging to learn English, and it's most especially hard to learn a language after English, like Korean, Japanese, Russian, French, or whatever you want to learn. It's quite hard, honestly. Now, those who are proficient in second language are often referred to as near native speakers. Okay, even though I am fluent in speaking the English language, I cannot be considered a native English speaker because my native language is Filipino. So my categorization is near native English speaker. Okay, so that's what we are called. Now, a second language can be any language as long as it is not your mother tongue or your native tongue. The process of learning this is active and demands a lot of effort to familiarize yourself with grammar rules because there are certain languages where the system or the grammar rules are different from your native tongue. For example, I will write it in your chat box. Ganito yan. Um, ang usual na syntactic structure ng English is, for example, I ate a burger. Yan yung sentence. I ate a hamburger. So usually, the noun comes first, the subject comes first, which is I, the noun, I mean the pronoun, and then ate is the verb followed by the object, the hamburger. But in a Korean syntactic structure, it's different. I cannot write actually the Hangul because I cannot have here, but I'll just write the Romanized version. Yeah. 나는 햄버거 먹었어. So 나는 means I, and then hamburger of course is hamburger. Hamburger, I'm spelling hamburger. Hindi ko na alam spelling hamburger. Hamburger. Mogosо means eat. Ayan. So makita ninyo, in our first sentence, which is in English, I ate a hamburger, the verb comes first before the object. But in a Korean syntactic system, the object comes first before the verb. So when I am a Korean person trying to speak English, when I want to translate what I want to say in English, so I say I hamburger eat because that's my native language's syntactic structure. So that's why it's very difficult to learn another language aside from your native language. It takes a lot of effort to master the grammar rules, syntactic rules, semantic rules, phonology, morphology, all of it. Okay? That's the difference between first language and second language. Now, in countries where English is not a native language, for instance, here in the Philippines, school kids are often taught English as a compulsory second language so they can integrate with others in the corporate world. It's very important to learn English because it is the lingua franca of the world. It is used in the business world. So in order for us to communicate with other people whose who have a different native language other than English, then it's very important to learn English. Okay, so it's our job to make sure that our learners, our future learners, properly learn how to speak English. Okay, now what are from this definition alone? What do you think are the key differences between a first language and a second language? I repeat, what now are the key differences between a first language and a second language? Let's have Miss Panya. Miss Panya?
Okay, the key differences, ma'am. I'll give phrases po. So first is the difference between first language and second language. Second language is a non-native language, while the first language is a native language. So second language can be learned at school, books, or newspapers, television, something like that. And the first language can be learned through your parents. Yes, from your household. That's it.
Thank you. Very good. That's a good explanation. What else? How about I select those from may nagka-heart. Hindi ba ako naririnig? Am I not clear? Can you hear me well? Some are nodding their heads. I haven't heard the voice of, let's see, kari mga nagtago-tago diri be, tawagon na to ni be. Oh, let's hear from Narvaza. John Narvaza.
Yes, ma'am.
What are the differences between first language and second language?
For me, ma'am, the differences of first language and second language is the first language is acquisition is a children's acquisition or their native language, and the second language, ma'am, is the learning language after the acquiring the mother tongue. For me lang po, ma'am.
Oh, that's correct. That's correct. Thank you. Very good. What about, let me see, CJ, Domen, CJ? CJ, are you there? Parang nagtatawag ng espiritu. CJ, are you there? Can you hear me, CJ? Mm-hmm. Wala si CJ. CJ? CJ, are you there? Yep, CJ disappeared. What about, Lamputi Rika? Rika?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, give me a difference between language, as first language and second language.
So for me, ma'am, first language is a language that a person has learned from birth. So it means that you are already fluent with, you are already fluent to speak that language because you already learned it ever since when you are a child. And then second language is a person learns in order to communicate with the native speaker of that language. So therefore, it is often difficult for us to reach native like fluency in a second language.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer, Miss Lamputi. Now, those are some of the differences of first language and second language. Now, for me, there are three key differences between first language and second language. The first one is its definition, second is complexity, and the third is learning process. So, of course, the definition, you already know that first language is native, second language is non-native. The second one is complexity because it's far more difficult to learn the second language because we learn the first language. It is acquired naturally and effortlessly. You learn it as you interact with your parents or the people around you when you're young. But in a second language, you have to learn it at school. We have to formally, that's the key word there. You have to formally learn it at school, or we apply in a tutorial center where you want to learn a second language. So it's far more complex. The one factor also that makes it difficult to learn our second language, especially when we are older, it's because 13 years old and below, the brain of a child is like a sponge. It can literally absorb all the information that they hear, see, feel, touch, smell, or whatever. It's an effortless thing for them to do. But as you grow up, you experience fossilization, wherein somehow your capacity to absorb information goes a little bit lesser as time goes by. So it's much harder to learn another language. And of course, the third one is the learning process. As what I mentioned, we learn our first language in the comfort of our homes by conversing with our parents, but our second language, we acquire it formally through classrooms, through going to school, or online tutorials, or even listening to others speak in a different linguistic environment or foreign country. Okay? We still have other differences between L1 and L2, and you will see it in the module that I will be posting tonight or tomorrow so that you can start with your lesson. Okay? Now, that ends our lesson for this topic, L1. So it's quite easy, diba? It's not very burdensome. But your main task, by the way, for this topic is by group. Okay. So sa group chat, I will be asking ano ba tawag ito? I will be asking for those who have a stable internet connection or yung may luxury when it comes to technology or gadget kasi it would be a great help for you to help your other classmates and all of that. Okay, so para sa late I will be discussing your assessment or your main task sa open LMS, and then I will inform you if na-post ko na para makita ninyo. Okay, and for the groupings we will decide on it in your group chat so that it won't be difficult to interact with you kasi para hindi rin mahirap para sa inyo. And of course, this is also an opportunity